say you're hiring, scaling up your engineering team. You have 20 resumes that come in. You're like, oh, this person looks good. This guy looks good. This guy looks good. This guy looks good. Like, boom, your team is filled. That's the easy path. Okay, the hard path is saying, I've got to fill 10 positions on my team. And for every position, I want to see 2 female candidates for every position. For every one position that I'm seeing a male resume, I want to see 2 females. That takes longer. And so, but if you do that from the beginning, then it becomes easier because the culture that's built, the team that's built, the network that you've built as a company is more diverse and it feeds itself. It becomes an ecosystem. It's too late if you wait until you've scaled and it's at the end.
You just heard from Leah Solivan, the founder of Taskrabbit and the founder and managing director at Precedent VC. And the way she thinks about hiring is pretty simple. Diversity doesn't happen by accident. It's a choice that has to be made from day one. Leah built Taskrabbit from scratch, bootstrapping it on credit cards and scaling it into one of the most defining companies of the gig economy and eventually selling it to IKEA. Now, as an investor, she's doubling down on a core belief. The best companies aren't built from the same pipeline everyone else hires from. Diverse backgrounds and life experiences do in fact lead to more original category-defining ideas. And in this episode, we talk about what it actually takes to source diverse talent from day one, how to hire for culture over credentials, and how cultivating new perspectives among LPs and VCs will in fact lead to more money backing ideas from underrepresented founders. I'm your host, Isabelle Johannessen, and you're listening to Build Mode, and this season is all about building a world-class team. I want to remind all the Build Mode listeners that applications for the Startup Battlefield are now open. So if you're building an early-stage company or have an MVP, apply for the program at techcrunch.com/apply. And if you want to take these conversations into the real world, then be sure to join us for TechCrunch Disrupt, happening October 13 to 15 in San Francisco. Tickets are on sale now at techcrunch.com/events. And be sure to use code BuildMode15 for 15% off all ticket types. We can't wait to see you there. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's get into my conversation with the exceptional Leah Solivan. Hi, Leah. Welcome to Build Mode.
Thanks so much for having me here.
We are very excited to have you here and to dig into, many different topics today. But to kick us off, can you just give us a little bit of insight into your background and how you ended up founding Taskrabbit and then becoming a VC yourself?
Yeah, I started out as an engineer. I was a math computer science major in college, fell in love with engineering and software development. I spent about 8 years at IBM, and then I had the idea for my company, Taskrabbit. And so I founded Taskrabbit back in 2008. I built the first version of the site myself, kind of got it launched in the Boston area, which is where I grew up and where I'm from. And then it kind of snowballed from there. By 2009, I was out here in the Bay Area raising venture capital funding. Over the course of really the next decade, I scaled the company up and raised about $50 million in venture capital funding. And then in 2017, I sold the company to IKEA, the global furniture retailer. So you can still get your Taskrabbit IKEA furniture assembled. And that was the point where I jumped over to the investing side full time. So I've been at Fuel Capital, where I manage alongside my partner, Chris Howard, 3 high-performing funds. And I'm actually spinning out a new fund of my own called Precedent VC.
Ooh, what's the premise for Precedent VC?
Well, Precedent is all about finding the next generation of category-defining companies and teams that are setting new precedents in their fields.
I love it. So where did the idea for Taskrabbit come from?
It came out of sort of a real life problem. It was February of 2008. I was living in Boston at the time. It was cold. It was snowing outside. And I realized I was out of dog food. And at the time, I had this 100-pound yellow lab named Kobe, who I kept very well fed. And when I realized I was out of dog food, I was getting ready to go across town and meet friends for dinner. And I was like, okay, how am I going to get this dog food? This is such a simple problem. Why isn't there a simple solution? It was just a few months prior to that the iPhone had launched, the very first version of the iPhone. And I thought, as an engineer and as a technologist, there's got to be a way to connect with someone with this new device we all have in our hands. And maybe there's someone at the store at this very second, and it's just a matter of being able to connect with them. And so that was the idea for Taskrabbit. I ended up quitting my job at IBM 4 months later and building the first version of the site.
I mean, that is, I think the best example of having a real problem and then being able to, put it into your own hands and solve it, right?
It's hard to hit problems in real life and be able to put yourself into an entrepreneurial mindset. But if I hadn't been kind of thinking entrepreneurially and pushing myself in that moment to find solutions, I mean, I would have just like blazed through this everyday problem like, I had done in the past. So I think it's about kind of shifting your mind to a place where you're looking at things that you've seen maybe 1,000 different times, but you try to see it in a new way.
Absolutely. More solution oriented. And yeah. But so I wanted to actually ask you about this. I work with a lot of, early stage technical founders. So they may have, invented this idea or built it themselves. And, the work that I do is to come in and help them learn to pitch it, get their branding and messaging. But at some point they need to hire, a business type, a CEO type to help them grow and scale the company. But you are technical and were the CEO of Taskrabbit for many years, 8 years?
Yeah, 8, 9 years. Yeah, something like that.
But, and
Yes.
so at what
Yeah.
point did you decide that, you were going to step down as CEO and bring someone else in?
Yeah, well, there were a couple points in that journey, I gotta say. And early on, I do, if I'm being really honest with you, feel like I had this imposter syndrome. Like, I was a technical leader, I was a product leader. I did not go to business school. I didn't know how to build financial models, right? I mean, there was a huge learning curve to raising money and building a business like I did with TaskRabbit. And I was constantly looking for the right people to bring onto the team. And so, one of those right people was Stacy Brown-Philpott, who I brought in as our COO. And her and I just created such a special and important partnership. She was really in the trenches with me and really was my counterpart. And so when I was ready, I was pregnant with my second child at that time and wanted to make a transition to the board. Stacy was ready to go and I had full trust in her. And so the board and I promoted her to CEO. I became chairman of the board. That decision was one of the easiest ones I made because we had built so much trust over the years between each other.
Wow, it sounds, right place, right time, right person. All of the stars align. That's great. I'm curious what, in your work as a VC now, if you see founders that are technical and are maybe, or the way around, where it's a business founder who's maybe lacking that technical co-founder, I feel like that can be a little bit more of like a pitfall and how do we even get from A to B? But I often see technical founders scaling who maybe don't have sort of the personality that I clearly you have in 10 minutes of talking to you can do both sides of the coin, you know what I mean? Can be technical and a leader, but not everyone does. Sort of what do you advise companies that are maybe in a deeper tech space?
Yeah, I mean, well, I've got to say, even for me, the hardest thing about building and scaling TaskRabbit was building and scaling the team. And as I look back on my time as CEO for, almost a decade, it was those moments that were people oriented, people operations, organizational changes and transitions we had to go through that were the hardest moments for me. And so, it is being able to manage and inspire and scale people is such a skill. And not everyone has it, as you mentioned, right? And so you just got to find, the people around you that do have that skill, that do like flex up in that role. And many times it may mean that maybe they don't have as much technical skills. And right, like you're right, there's this spectrum, right, of the type of business leader you need to be. And, a business leader can't do everything by themselves, right? Like the key is to find what is the mosaic, what is the puzzle that you're putting together for you and your executive team that is going to offer the best coverage and the highest probability of success. So I think again, it's just really about finding the people that complement you. And there's no magic formula either, right? Because we're all so different. We all have different skills and inflection points. And so it's about finding the people that fit in and kind of help augment, what you as a founder can offer.
I love the sort of vision of a mosaic when you say that, because I imagine it starts with a lot of self-reflection. Like, what are my weaknesses? What are my gaps? That, and being really strict with yourself of understanding, like, I'm not even going to try to tiptoe into this. Let's bring someone on.
Yeah, I think it's both being self-aware enough and low enough ego to say that, but also balanced with that imposter syndrome that I think so many people can face, and I think particularly women can face. I'll just say it, right? And I think that can really hinder, the success of some people is that constant doubt or self-doubt or, so I think there's a balance of like you've got to be self-aware, but you've also got to be like I've got this and I'm in it and I'm going to figure out what I don't know how to do.
That's fantastic. So, I mean, when you were just starting your first company, I can imagine there were some doubts. I mean, for anybody, there would be, right? But especially, I mean, if you've never done it before and maybe you're not, born and bred in Silicon Valley where it's all around you. I mean, was it sort of a wild thing for you to be doing, or did you have peers who were building companies already?
No, I knew no one that was building a company, okay? Someone asked me the other day, I was being interviewed and this person is writing a book and he was asking me about my journey and he's like, "Oh, Boston, 2008." He's like, "Why didn't you just apply to YC?" I'm like, "I didn't even know what YC was." Like that wasn't my network, right? And, even growing up, my parents, like my mom was stay at home. My dad was in the Air Force for 35 years, like very middle class, rural Massachusetts. Okay. Like there were no tech entrepreneurs in my high school or so it's just very different. I remember having moments where I had to really make a decision about how much risk I was going to take and how much I needed to believe in myself to do it. And I remember this one moment where I was thinking about starting Taskrabbit and I was asking all these questions and I was like, "Oh, but I don't even know how to build this financial model." And then I just was kind of like, "You know what? This is not rocket science. Like I can figure this out. I'm just going to go figure it out." And that's what I did. And for anything I couldn't figure out fast enough, that's when you find other people to come in that have figured it out and know different playbooks than you do.
And so you bootstrapped the company initially, right? Again, continuing on this thread, if you weren't in the middle of Silicon Valley with VCs running amok. So from bootstrap to acquisition, how did your sort of philosophy on building a team and hiring evolve?
It evolved a lot. I mean, I did bootstrap TaskRabbit for like the first 18 months we existed. So it was, maxing out credit cards. I had a teeny tiny pension from IBM, which was $25,000 that I, deducted with a penalty to use it. And that's how I funded the company for a year and a half until our first seed round of funding, which was led by Ann Miraco at Floodgate Fund out here in the Bay Area. And it wasn't till I came out here, that I was really able to meet Ann and others in the network. And early on, when I was working at IBM, I was never a manager of people. I'd never hired anyone. I had never fired anyone. And so there's a lot to learn there too. I think I remember, bringing on the first few people and realizing that, whatever people have on their resume and whatever they say they can do, like that doesn't actually mean they can do it. you know? And so actually, interviewing people and then starting to learn, you need to ask about, like, can you give me a story? Can you give me an example? Tell me about a time when, you faced a challenge like this and how did you handle it, right? And then you start to understand like what their capabilities are. And then I think over time that, the hiring evolved. We got to a place where, we had a full-time recruiter at TaskRabbit that was in charge of hiring people that fit great in our culture. I remember hiring our first employee, the very first one, and that person I hired to take over all the engineering from me. That person, Brian Leonard, actually is the longest tenured employee at TaskRabbit ever because he was employee number one and he stayed all the way through the IKEA acquisition. So, there was such a wide range of hiring support that I had over the years, whether it was just me in the beginning or if I had professional recruiters to work with. And it was a constant game of learning what to ask and how to assess people quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is a skill, I think, in life in general, but especially when you are, of course, running and building a company where every hire counts.
Every hire counts, not to mention we had 60,000 taskers.
Yeah.
Which is, they were never hired as full-time employees, but we had to show discernment in who we let on the platform in the marketplace. There was a lot of trust involved that we were building with customers. And so that was a whole other chunk of learning that had to happen for TaskRabbit to succeed.
Yeah, and I mean, so you were mentioning that Anne from Floodgate was one of your first institutional investors. I'm curious, of course, this was a pretty new bet in 2008, right? The gig economy was just kind of starting up. Uber didn't exist yet, right? I mean, and this concept really today it seems, it's everywhere in many ways because of you and because of, companies that fed off of that. But for her to take this bet, she must have clearly seen something in you and in this vision. How was it to have a woman on the cap table and to have her, part of these conversations as an investor? Do you think that made an impact on you as your first investor? Was that part of the decision at all?
I mean, I don't think I realized at the time how lucky I was to get Anne.
Yeah.
I remember that first round too. I was coming out of an incubator program that Facebook was running that summer called FB Fund. And I was there with, John and Logan from Lyft and Victoria from Wildfire and Layla from Samasaurus. And it was an incredible cohort of entrepreneurs. And so coming out of there was a demo day. And I remember having a couple of term sheets that I was looking at. And one was from Anne. And, there were others from other more like angel type investors, not as institutional. Anne and I immediately clicked and connected. She's so incredibly smart. I was the first company she invested in.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And so it's kind of crazy to think about because she not only was making this big bet on the gig economy before it was the gig economy, but she was taking a bet on me as a first-time founder. She was taking a bet on a female founder, right? And it was her very first deal out of that fund as a venture capitalist. Now, what's interesting, though, is if you look at statistics, women venture capitalists are twice as likely to invest in female founders. And that's just the numbers. Like, that's just the statistics. And that's without even trying. And so, although I had choices at that round, working with Anne, like, it was a dream come true. But I didn't really realize at the time either that actually the statistics and the odds were probably stacked against me in some way. I had no idea, right? Because this was all new to me as well. I wasn't sort of ingrained in Silicon Valley or, I hadn't been like out pitching around the VC circuit that much. It was like this incubator program and this demo day. So,
it's pretty wild to think about, TaskRabbit and Lyft pitching at a demo day. And I mean, to think back to those days compared to where you are now is really interesting. But kind of continuing on this note of, female founders struggling a little bit to raise funds, less than 2%. Maybe it's gone up a little bit now of venture capital money is going.
If it's gone up at all, it is negligible.
Minimal, yeah.
It is not worth noting.
Correct. That's what I said too.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, I mean, in Startup Battlefield, we, make sure that we have a lot of women founders represented at the table. I know most of the investors that I work with are also very inspired by all these companies that women are building. But what do you think it is going to take to actually increase that statistic?
Okay, I think that the entire system of venture capital is set up in a way that it's difficult for women to break through. It's not only difficult for women, it's difficult for people of color, it's difficult for any underrepresented group, really. And that is if you kind of follow the money through the system, the money comes from limited partners, from LPs. And a lot of these are very traditional programs, endowments, fund of funds, foundations. And they're the ones that decide who to give the money to venture capitalists, who gets the VC money, whose funds are we going to invest in? And from there, then the venture capitalists then choose which founders they're going to invest in. So if you kind of follow the money all the way up the chain and then all the way back down, at every single level in this system, there is a lot of bias. There's a lot of bias built in. And, I'll say it again. A female investor is twice as likely to invest in a female founder. But that female investor first has to get her fund raised. Okay? And so why don't we see more, female-led funds, right? It the money is there, but it is sort of, it's being controlled by people that have different biases. And, a lot of those biases are unnamed and, this is not malicious, right? Like people don't have anything against women or minorities or underrepresented groups in founding companies, but those groups also have very different networks. And this is true of hiring as well. So if you're going to look for founders to invest in, if you're going to look for people to hire for your company, and you want those founders or you want those hires to be more diverse, you've got to spend the extra time in going outside of your typical network, off the beaten path to find those people. And it takes a little bit extra work. And you may or may not have those connections in that network to make it happen either. And so, there's a lot of hurdles to break through to actually get the money from LPs' pockets down into the founders' pockets. And then those founders, as you talk about hiring teams and organizations, like how can you get them too to think about making their teams more diverse as well? I mean, it really, if you just follow the capital, the answer is there, but it's really complex to change.
Solution is not there yet. I mean, that is exactly, I think the answer is, in so much ingrained bias that people don't know they had, like you said, right? So even just bringing awareness and having these kinds of conversations, I think is the bare minimum that we can do to at least start the conversation and go from there. I do want to kind of dig into a bunch of what you just said, though. I mean, going back to the imposter syndrome, I'm curious to hear your take on this. When I work with, a lot of young women founders, we often see that they're a little bit more hesitant to scream some of their big traction and their big accomplishments, right? Whereas other founders that we might work with, tattoo it on their forehead, right? I have 500 customers. And I feel like oftentimes the women founders are like, yeah, well, we haven't fully signed this contract yet, so I'm not going to tattoo it on my head yet. Or, this one's in conversation where, male founders might be more willing to kind of state that traction. Do you notice any other sort of nuances or small things that might get looked at by a VC and say, maybe, less confidence or imposter syndrome,
Yes. I mean, okay, any founder walking in to pitch a VC, it is a 99.9% chance they're going to say no to anyone. All right. And so, because, we see thousands and thousands of deals a year, and we can do like a handful of deals. Okay. Out of the thousands we see, we're doing a handful. And it, depends on your fund size and model, et cetera, to simplify it down to the easiest, simplest case. Right. So any founder has odds stacked against them. The statistics are against them. Now, add to that any sort of reason for an investor to say no, whether it be you stumble through your pitch deck, you're not showing enough confidence, you're not showing, enough enthusiasm, you're not good at storytelling. There's just a million reasons why a VC, why an investor could say no. And so, yeah, I think that when you look at the statistics and you look at women, you look at underrepresented groups pitching, even just the way they're pitching, it's any little difference. It could be, the reason why you're getting a no instead of a yes. And I think women, as we've grown up, we've sort of been bred to be, more pleasant or smile more or be nice or don't impose. Like there's all these things that, just is kind of beaten into us over the decades of life that we have lived, right? Before we get to that pitch room.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
It's like we are rewarded up into that moment for not being those things.
Preach.
Okay. But that is the moment where you just need to go like crouching tiger, hidden dragon, like full on, like 100%, just like all out slay. Like that's it. Okay. But it's like, but every other occasion that we've ever had to show up anywhere, that has not been rewarded.
Yes. And we were just talking about this before we started recording as two former ballerinas, right? The epitome of having to be beautiful and elegant and graceful and quiet and all of these things that are the opposite of how bold and audacious and all of these things you need to be to go pitch in a room to VCs, right?
100%.
I mean, I'm sure there's some crossovers and skills we might have learned from that, but still, I mean, it is sort of, the two sides of the spectrum. But, even to get that pitch opportunity in front of a VC, I feel like there are still so many pitfalls that women founders might face. I mean, a lot of minority founders in general are building in more niche spaces, right? It's probably not more often enterprise SaaS, right? It's a lot more maybe healthcare, right? Or it's problems that they've experienced in their community, in their culture,
Totally.
that the kind of, the typical VC has not experienced and cannot resonate with.
Totally. 100%. And that, okay, so that problem could be solved by more VCs understanding those cultures, those communities, or creating funds that, are able to support those markets. And we see this happening. Like Stacey Brown Philpott from TaskRabbit has Cherry Rock Capital now, where she is explicitly backing and supporting Black and brown founders at Series A and beyond, right? Like that is necessary and that is needed. There's also Samara Hernandez at Chingona Ventures, right? Like she understands these communities in a way that other VCs don't, and she's writing first checks in. She is that friends and family check, right? That others might be able to actually get from friends and family, but like she can be the friends and family check. So I do think that is true, that, sometimes these founders are building for different communities that the venture funds may not understand, but that's why we need more diverse people running venture funds as well. And I can even say with TaskRabbit, I would go in and pitch, all the top tier funds and firms. And I would say about half the time or more, the feedback I would get is, well, I don't do any of the errands in my house. So like, I'm going to talk to my wife about this, or I'm going to have our admin try it, because like, they're not going to use it. And so even TaskRabbit, being this brand and this marketplace and company that's widespread that I built, was considered more of a niche play when I was pitching VCs.
Wow. I mean, It's just crazy because the market it's enormous. It's almost everyone, right? Like how,
And it took Anne to seed it.
Thank you, Anne. Anne was a startup Battlefield judge recently, so we got to chat. She's phenomenal, and I applaud her for that bet, because it was risky, but it clearly paid off, and that's really awesome. Yes, we need more women in venture. I think that is sort of the answer to that part of the conversation. I do want to talk a little bit about just generally like your advice for early stage founders building diverse teams, right? How much of a priority should it be, and how should they go about doing it from day one? I feel like oftentimes it's sort of like the company is scaled and it's an afterthought. Now we should be diverse, but really from day one.
Yeah, you can't save it till later because it'll never happen. You can't. And why is that? Well, because it's easier to swim in the flow of the river, right? It's like, it's easier just to say you're hiring, scaling up your engineering team. You have 20 resumes that come in. You're like, oh, this person looks good. This guy looks good. This guy looks good. This guy looks good. Like, boom, your team is filled. That's the easy path. Okay, the hard path is saying, I've got to fill 10 positions on my team. And for every position, I want to see 2 female candidates for every position. For every one position that I'm seeing a male resume, I want to see 2 females. That takes longer. But if you do that from the beginning, and we did that at TaskRabbit from the beginning, and our networks were different too, right? We knew people that, looked different and thought differently. And so that helps too. If your founding team is diverse, that already gives you an edge. And so, but if you do that from the beginning, then it becomes easier, because the culture that's built, the team that's built, the network that you've built as a company is more diverse, and it feeds itself. It becomes an ecosystem. It's too late if you wait until you've scaled and it's at the end. Yeah.
No, I agree. And I'm curious if women founders take more or put more attention on building diverse teams just off, almost instinctively, right? Like I see the value clearly in having a diverse team.
Totally.
Rather than it being a box I need to check.
Yes.
But in turn, women founded companies are often more successful in many ways, right? And I can't help but thinking those two go hand in hand. But I'm curious on your take. Why do we think that, women founded companies are so successful?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And the numbers back it up too. There's data that shows that, more diverse teams, founding teams, are more profitable. They build more profitable businesses. And so, if as an investor you want to invest in a higher return, more profitable business, you should be investing in more diverse founding teams as well. And then if you're an LP that wants to invest in a fund that wants to see a high ROI on your fund returns, you should be asking your general partner fund managers how they think about diversity and investing. Like it flows all the way up and down the chain, right? I think the other component is that we as women, and I think underrepresented groups as well, we're so used to kind of like fighting our way through life and fighting our way through things. And, you get to a point, at least I feel this way, where you've had success. You've, completed the marathon. You've like reached that goal. And then what do? Well, you want to bring others along. I mean, I almost feel this like it's not almost. I feel this obligation to bring others along, right? And so for me it's not just about investing out of a fund and great, it's like if I'm looking at it through my lens, then I'll probably invest, I'm twice as likely to invest in a female founder than, my partner might be. Great. But it's like on top of that, there is an obligation to change the system because I've lived through the system, right? And I think, anytime a female founder has had success, has lived through the system, there is that drive too to be like, wow, that really needs to change. We should change that.
And so how are we going to change it? I mean, what are you investing in these days?
Yeah, well, so I'm doing all pre-seed, seed investing. Of course, tech, a lot of consumer, a lot of marketplaces, looking at a wide range of teams. What I love about where I invest, it's typically the first money in, right? It's pre-seed or seed, and it's very collaborative with other funds. So I love working with funds like Samara at Chingana, with like Anne at Floodgate, right? Like there's a whole group of seed investors that are really collaborative, that are sharing deal flow, that are saying like, oh, hey, I just got this cold pitch email. Have you seen this? Do you want to take a look at it with me? And so it's actually a really nice way of investing. Once you get to like a Series A, Series B, and beyond, it's a little bit different because you're usually the only money in. You want to write the biggest check. You don't want anyone else to win that deal, right? So it's a lot of sharp elbows. But at seed, you can be kind of collaborative and open. And so I love that aspect of investing, and I love being able to share deal flow, and then help those companies really get to that next stage as well.
I want to talk a little bit about firing or letting people go, because I think this is a topic that I have a hypothesis. I don't know if there's data to back it up, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts about. I have a theory that I think women leaders would be more empathetic and be more graceful in a layoff situation or in a firing situation, right? I think we look at some of the like mass layoffs that have happened in the last couple of years, and I think there's so much like a lack of understanding or empathy or compassion for the lives of these people that have just been ripped out from under them. I'm curious to hear. I know that you've had to do some, workforce reductions over your career, and how that was for you and how you handled it and how you approached the challenge. I mean, it's a terrible situation, but
It is a terrible situation. I mean, I got to tell you, it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire career was the reduction in force. And we did it at Taskrabbit. I've seen other companies go through it. I've coached other founders through it as well. It is terrible. I did feel awful. When I did it at Taskrabbit too, I was 8 months pregnant with my first child. And that was very stressful as well. And I remember, coming into the office that day and like knowing this needed to happen and kind of going through the motions and then being under so much stress that I actually like thought that the baby was in distress. It was all I ended up in the hospital, and even through all of that, I felt like, wow, like what I just had to do to these people and to their lives, it's like what I'm going through right now is like nothing compared to that. Like, it was like that was the mentality and stress that was carried. And still you feel really bad. But these things do need to be done in business, and they're not personal. They're really about what the business needs at any given moment. And so I think After you've been through it once, after you've had to fire someone, after you've realized that that amazing engineer that you just won and just hired isn't the right culture fit and it's going to be very toxic on the team and you've got to let that person go. So I think that, you know, finding that empathy to be able to acknowledge, support, hold space for these humans that have dedicated themselves and their lives to your company is an important thing to acknowledge, and at the same time, making the tough calls that are going to help the business survive.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I can only imagine how difficult that is, and especially being pregnant, but I mean, especially like feeling the responsibility for these livelihoods. Like I kudos to the way you handled it, honestly, and to all of those out there who had to go through that. I think there's a good way and a bad way to do it, but there's no like perfect way to do it. It is what it
No,
is.
it is what it is. And, I had coaches too that kind of helped me through it those first few times and they gave me great advice. And so, I think it's another skill you have to learn as you scale a company.
Right, not everything is fun. But you did mention, so, an employee potentially not being a great culture fit. And I do want to tap into this element of building a company culture. What was sort of your philosophy or your mindset in building TaskRabbit? What did you keep top of mind for yourself, but also for your team?
Yeah, culture was a big focus for us from early on. And I'm trying to understand maybe where that came from. I think it was just instinctual from me that culture was going to be important. And I wanted to work with great people and I wanted to surround myself with great people. And I did not want to be in a toxic work environment. And so we were very, very protective. We put culture above skills in a few occasions that I can remember very vividly. I remember doing an acquisition of a company for TaskRabbit and interviewing the team that was to be acquired and realizing that more than half of them were going to be not the right culture fit and then killing the acquisition. Yeah. I remember hiring, this great engineer that everyone loved that was like, oh, this is a 10x engineer. This person's going to be amazing. He comes in on, day one, spends half a day, and the whole team is like, this isn't going to work. And we let him go.
But what is it that kind of gives, is it just an instinctual, this isn't going to fit, or are there some clear red flags that you were looking for?
Yeah. I mean, for us, we had a very transparent organization. We're open communicators. We were also very respectful, though. I would say we were balanced. A lot of us did have families and children. Um, and so, we were just looking for good, solid people that were really bought into our mission and vision for TaskRabbit. The other thing that was really nice about TaskRabbit and a lot of companies is if you are a mission-driven business, like you really are trying to achieve something that enables others, that is high impact for others, like that can really drive your culture as well. So it's actually pretty easy to, kind of like weed out who really bought into the mission, vision, values and who was just there to, like get the paycheck. And so that made it pretty easy for us, actually, I think, to kind of triage and source the right people.
So you have talked a bit about being, from sort of a different ecosystem in Boston, not having the typical founder background that we see in Silicon Valley, but we see founders from all over the world. I'm sure you do as well in your deal flow. But what do you advise to founders who maybe don't fit that stereotypical mold that we see around here? How can they go about sort of building that ecosystem and getting the attention of investors and the credibility maybe that they need to sort of, scale?
I think one thing that really helped me in building network was finding finding a way into the Silicon Valley network. And I did that through an incubator program. I'm a huge fan of accelerators, incubators, even if they're not here in Silicon Valley, like all over the world, there are these programs happening. And I think that's a quick way too for investors like myself now to kind of scan and triage, like what are coming out of these interesting accelerators, incubator programs. So I think that's a way to like quickly build network, quickly get on people's radar. And then I think you also have to be working on something that you're really purpose built for, that you deeply understand, that you're really passionate about. And I think in that way, you will probably be able to emerge and share that passion much easier and much faster.
Yeah, I still do run an accelerator with Startup Battlefield, but I used to run those sort of government-sponsored programs from all corners of the world, and there are so many interesting companies coming out of places that you would not expect, and they're building things that you don't expect, which is, of course, what we're all looking for at the end of the day as a VC or even a journalist, right? Speaking of unexpected, what was surprising to you about being on the other side of the table now as a VC?
Whew, so much. I was surprised by so much. I think the number one thing that was the biggest surprise was when I was running TaskRabbit, I was always nervous about the competition. And the competition were, Zarly and Homejoy and, Thumbtack and Handy and all these companies popping up that were doing the same thing as us. Oh, these companies are going to fast follow. We were the first, and now they're copying us. And that was like the obsession around competition. Now I realize as an investor that I should have been more interested / concerned about what was the competition in my investors' portfolio. Because my investors actually making decisions about where to put their money next. And it has nothing to do with the competition in my industry. But as an example, Anne went on to invest in Lyft. Rob Hayes at First Round went on to invest in Uber. Steve Anderson at Baseline went on to invest in Instagram. So I'm now TaskRabbit in a portfolio with Lyft, Uber, and Instagram. Do you think I'm the one that's going to get their extra dollars? Or are they going to put them in Lyft, Uber, and Instagram, right? Like it's just a matter of like what are the rocket ship deals? What are the rocket ship companies? And if you're in a portfolio of one of those, I think it's helpful to understand that your competition for dollars are those companies.
That's a really interesting perspective. I think a lot of founders overlook. I will say, it's similar, with media, even in Startup Battlefield, right? Like we're not looking at two different competitors next to each other. It's, you need like the best fintech, the best health tech, almost one in every space. Like it doesn't matter what's happening. It does matter, of course, what's happening in the industries and in their direct competitors. That's yeah. But I think that also helps shape how founders can build some of these moonshot ideas, right? Like don't look at how you can differentiate one product element or play on price or these little competitive advantages. Build a ridiculously epic moat because nobody's even thought to, build, what you're going for.
I think that's such a good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you were going to do it all over again and start a company, what advice would you give yourself from the very earliest of stages?
One, I think don't second guess myself. I think I probably had a company in me before TaskRabbit, but I was too scared to do it. And it would have been great to, get a company done and get through all the failures and learnings and then go build TaskRabbit, right? So that's one. And I think the other thing in hindsight is just try to iterate faster on product. Just try to evolve, try to be more agile. I think sometimes we got so married to a particular product flow or a particular experience, and we just didn't change fast enough. And looking back in hindsight, I wish we had gotten to mobile sooner and faster and native mobile sooner and faster, right? And now in the age of AI, like I think there's a whole AI native TaskRabbit to be built, right? Like someone is probably building at this very moment, and I want to talk to them.
Yeah, call Leah.
Yeah, call me. So I think that technology is moving so fast and there's so much happening, and you just got to be agile and, be constantly evolving.
Yeah, and that's a lot easier said than done. So I can only imagine hindsight is 2020. But to wrap up, I want to kind of end on a little bit of a lofty note here, but we've, had so many kind of inspirational moments here that I want to encapsulate with. It sounds like we need to get more young women into VC and into founderhood on both fronts, right? For this cycle to be broken and continue in a better direction. What do you think, and what advice or what call to action do you sort of have for maybe, college age girls or even younger to become founders and build companies and to get into venture capital? How can we encourage that?
Yeah, I think we've got to put more dollars into programs because we can't ask women in underrepresented groups to go do it, go build something without any support. You're asking someone to walk off the edge of a cliff. Like, let's build a net for them to jump into, right? And so I think it's about finding the dollars, finding the programs, raising the funds that are going to back this next generation That's what we've got to do. That's what we've got to be doing. And we've got to, find out, where these big pockets of capital are going to come from if we want this system to change.
Preach again. I know I've said it twice, but I'm so with you. And I'm really glad to hear you say it out loud, because I think sometimes we kind of just float around with if things could be better, but how? And let's actually take some action. So it has been a pleasure talking with you today, Leah. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Build Mode is a TechCrunch podcast. Each episode is produced and edited by Maggie Nye and hosted by me, Isabelle Johannessen. Our art and design is also by Maggie Nye. A big thanks to Morgan Little, who leads our audience development, the Foundry and Cheddar video teams, and most of all to you, the builders, and everyone else in the wider startup community. We'll see you back here next time.